grades cannot only be the metric that we use to determine a person's success, a person's ability.
If you can change one thing in our education system for your community of Beetham Gardens and environment that would position our community in a better place, what would that one thing be?
That was one of the experiences that pushed me in the direction of wanting to be an attorney, because I saw how easy injustice was. Knowing your rights and being able to enforce them are two separate and distinct things. I wanted to fight against injustice, and I wanted to use my experience to inspire others.
Welcome to another episode of The Blueprint with Dr. Jelani I. Reid. I am your host, Dr. Jelani Reid, medical doctor by profession, activist by passion, and a humble student of life and transformation and change. Now, what is the Blueprint podcast about? It is a space where we can have honest conversations, where we can collaborate on ideas, brainstorm on notions, and try to come up with a plan as to how we can execute it. What is the execution? The execution is a better and stronger Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the pillars to make a stronger, better Trinidad and Tobago is the pillar of education. In 1962, for independence, our first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, stressed on the importance of education. And he stated that the future of our nation is in the book bags of our children. And therefore, some persons use education as a catalyst for change, to change their circumstances, as many of us know, that regardless of where you come from, whatever station that you're in life, education is the grand equalizer. And to dive deeper into that discussion of education, we have a special guest here this morning with us. Some of us may know him as a community activist. Some of us may know him as the alderman from Port of Spain, and others may know him as the attorney at law. It is definitely my privilege to have none other than Mr. Kareem Marcelle as our guest this morning. Welcome, Kareem.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Dr. Reid. Dr. Reid, I want to congratulate you on this initiative. The launch of the Blueprint, I know, would go beyond borders. And I want to congratulate you, not just on this initiative, but also on your recent appointment to the Medical Board of Trinidad and Tobago. You exemplify excellence in so many different ways. And our young people continue to be inspired by you. And we just want to let you know that we are rooting for you.
I must appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, my brother.
So, Kareem, we're going to talk about education. But before we get into that, I have a video that I would like for you to see. All right? So you're just going to click play.
So we're live here this morning at the Hall of Justice. Kareem Marcelle, the first attorney to pass the bar in Beetham Gardens.
And here he is with his mother, a son of the soil of Beetham Gardens, Kareem Marcelle. Kareem Marcelle, a proud son of the soil of Beetham Gardens. As we could see the smile and the joy in his face. As we could see it, you could see the joy. You could see the joy. You could see the joy.
So, Kareem, it's one thing to see it, but tell me about how did you feel in that moment? What did it mean for you?
That video was a bit shocking, and it brought back so many memories and emotions. That moment, hands down, was one of the most emotional moments of my life. It's when it actually hit. You know, you enter law school. You enter UE first. You do your LLB. You enter Hewitt, and after you do your LEC. And even though you do your training as well. But that day, I had no idea that, so many different persons from my community and my family were outside waiting on me. And I just remember the joy on my mother's face on my nephew's face and my sister and so many different persons there, to know that it's not just a joy because, you finish all of school, but to know where I came from, to know what were the struggles going to school, to even think about dreaming that big was something that was not normal. I didn't have anyone in my family at that time who I can say, hey, I want to be an attorney, just like my uncle or my cousin or anybody like that. I was the first in my immediate family to go to university and then to go on to finish my LEC as well and become an attorney at law. So that in itself, was a sort of breaking ground sort of moment for my family. And I think that what it also did, that moment, and what it meant for me and so many others, is that what we were telling the world and what we were telling the young men in the community, in our communities, like Beetham Gardens, like Silas, like John, like Simple Street, like Picton, is that you too can do it. And I think that is what was the most important aspect of that journey and that moment for me.
That resonates well with me. I am the child of a truck driver and a homemaker. And by all accounts, all things being equal, you and I shouldn't reach where we have reached. And, it's because of a country like ours that placed an emphasis on education, that at least we have the opportunity. But what I want to find out from you, Kareem, is that is one opportunity. There are many other opportunities. I came across this story where on one occasion you would have lamented on your experience, where on one evening, students at Trinity College, you had an experience. And that experience, two things would have happened. You would have had an individual who chose education as his path, and you would have had an experience where three other individuals didn't choose education but another avenue. Why did you choose education?
I chose education because even though I went to, at first, Silver Life Center preschool at Beetham Gardens, and after that to Sacred Heart Boys RSC School. And even at Sacred Heart Boys RSC School, what it did for me was one, there was a good foundation in Sacred Heart Boys. But it also opened my mind to dreaming big, all right? And it is an opportunity at times that only now that I look back, when my other peers, my neighbors, my friends, may have gone to schools within the community, whether it's Beetham Gardens, Excel Primary School, whether it's Lavendale Boys, Lavendale Girls, different schools within the community. I realized that one of the things is that the conversations that my peers were having in school and the experiences that they were having in school, I didn't have much of that, in the sense that I may hear about, a big fight that happened very early in school and what the teacher had to do and who had to go to the principal office and so on. And I realized that discipline was also a serious issue. So whilst I would have had the benefit in Sacred Heart Boys of a school, very strict on discipline. You have persons coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And as anybody would know, denominational schools in Port of Spain are very hard to get into, right?
Yes.
And for different reasons. But it also comes with different experiences.
Yes.
And from then, I knew that education was my vehicle out of poverty. It meant that I had to work harder, and I've had to focus, and I've had to be very disciplined from very young. And because of that, and knowing at the end of the road, when you speak to persons and you have different conversation with your peers and their parents and so on, you realize that education is indeed at least one of the main vehicles out of poverty. And because of that, and that experience that you spoke about, at that time I was in Trinity College, and I had the National Youth Parliament the day right after, and my mother had a shop, and she would usually, apart from the shop selling regular mini mart stuff, we would also sell chicken and chips in the afternoon.
Right.
So in the evening. And so I would have to come back from school, since primary school, come from school, clean chicken, prepare ginger, prepare garlic, etc. Full box at the time. Well, now they get fancy with the boxes. They come in, we can just close. But before, it used to come flat, and you have to pay to get a fold it. And
So this is now Kareem the chef.
Yeah. I mean, I can't cook for the life of me, but I can really season chicken.
Chicken, nice. I know how to go to for a barbecue.
Yeah. And on that day, one of my friends who I didn't went to school with, but we were in the same class.
Right.
In terms of he went to Beetham Excel.
Right.
I went to Sacred Arts, and growing up, and police came and scraped up the block for persons. He had somebody close by had a stolen phone, and before you know it, police came and say 1, 2, 3, 4. Or they're going to Jeep there. We need ID parade. All right? And that was one of the experiences that also pushed me in the direction of wanting to be an attorney at law. Because I saw how easy injustice was. At that time, I didn't have any attorney to call. I didn't know my rights even if you knew your rights, knowing your rights and being able to enforce them are two separate and distinct things. But even that experience pushed me in the direction of knowing that I wanted to be an attorney at law. I wanted to fight against injustice, and I wanted to use my experience, to inspire others.
Oh, wonderful. Now, at least on 2 occasions thus far, you spoke about your mom, and it is clear to at least me the role that she would have played in your development and the Kareem Marcelle that we know today. Tell us a bit about your mom and the role that she played in helping you to navigate life.
My mom is Shuma Wilson, and she's a community activist. She's a former alderman at the San Juan Regional Corporation. And she is my rock. I know that if I had to do it all over again and I had to choose, again, I would still choose my mother. I would still choose the lessons that we learned, the struggles that we faced, because my mom became a single mother when I was around age 10 or 11. Prior to that, we grew up in a home with my father, my mom, and my other siblings. I'm the youngest of them all. And my mom at the time was a preschool teacher at first. She taught at Beetham Civil Life Center preschool. Then after she taught at YMCA and so on. But anybody advocacy as it relates to paying teachers what they really do is a whole other conversation. But
yes. Anybody
knows, especially early childhood, you would know that they are not paid and compensated well at all. And that was no different back then. So she was working a minimum wage paying job. My father was also a market sweeper, all right, in the Silas fisheries market. And they struggled to send all of us to school at the same time. All the siblings was, sending 4 children to school. It's no easy task, right, at minimum wage paying jobs. But even then, my mom had a passion for community service and just for service to others. Because even though we had very little, my mom still found time to share with others. She still found time in order to teach people how to read in the community, to help out other persons, other children in the community with after-school lessons, to at times to go and protest for our community center, the Beetham Gardens Community Center, that we have now, a very big state-of-the-art community center. That came out when my mother and Julia Davy at the time would have engaged in one of the biggest protests that it had in history. I mean, I'm not supposed to be able to about this. And my mom used me as a decoy. She kept me from school and she was like, let's walk down the road after 5 in the morning and to go and pretend like we go and check granny. But meanwhile, it's preparation for protest. And the protest was, never violent or anything like that. But at the time, Prime Minister Patrick Manning was in power. And I mean, we had placards. In fact, that was my first interview I ever do. I remember, saying that the devil find work for idle hands and put the community center and all young people work and so on. And so I grew up in that era seeing my mom, fighting for others. And my mom was also a victim of domestic violence. And I say this to bring one point concerning the community service and aspects of service to others. I remember one day my mom coming home and she just came from a community-related meeting trying to help persons and so on. And my father, he was upset. He was upset that frustrated perhaps that, that my mom came home, she didn't come home with, as if he gave her money, with probably things to make to eat or whatever the case may be. And he remember being in the kitchen, he pelted a plate at her, burst her head. And I rushed into him. I was in primary school, probably about 8 or 9 years. And, I too, got lashed. And while he's talking, he keep saying, why is my mother going out there and trying to help other people when we ourselves need help? And he couldn't understand it. And everything happens for a reason. And when I was in Standard 4 going into Standard 5, he left and migrated to the United States to start a new family and so on. And it was on that occasion that my mother found her strength and she started to bloom. I tell you, my mother left from working minimum wage paying jobs and was one of the highest paid radio talk show hosts within probably about a year or so, on Power 102. And she started to just bloom. And that is when life started to get better for us, after about 2 or 3 years after. But she exemplifies, what it is to be a strong black woman. And she have sacrificed so much for us, so much for us. And although when growing up, especially, at a very young age, we had it rough. One time my mother, we got up, everybody hungry in the house, and my mother put on a pot of water on the stove. And we asking her, well, mommy, what's going on? We hungry, So she put on the pot of water on the fire, simply just to appease us, to make it look as if she's cooking something. And she ran us from the kitchen, but kept putting salt, black pepper, any sort of seasoning that she could find in the water to make it smell as if something is cooking. Yeah. Until she was able to get my grandmother to send saltfish, she said, and at that day went to the neighbor who had a green fig tree and got to make some. And so it's that kind of struggle. It's that kind of struggle when you get up for school, you put on your full uniform, and you're not gonna say, Mommy, I have to come for money to go to school. And I said, like, nah, you go rest back, you go back to there, money for you to go back to, there's no money for you to go to school. But even then, even on the days that my mom did choose to send us to school, in terms of had the money in order to send us to school, even then, we can come back with extra pencil. We can come back with a KFC snack pack. We don't ask strangers for anything. No, I've gone to school and my friends can tell you that, hey, Marcelle used to ask me for X, Y, and Z. And they may not even have known the kind of struggles I was facing at home. But that is the type of strong black woman that raised me. So everything I am today, my activism was a result of her activism. I keep a tray and Christmas party every year because I saw my mom fight and kept her first tray and Christmas party, going out and just trying to make the community better. And that is where that passion came from. Living in a house with my own hero, just going up and getting it and helping others and fighting to help and serve others. Yeah.
You know, that is very interesting and a lot to unpack, because what we have learned thus far is the importance of the role of a parent. That, you know, regardless of circumstance, a parent's role is tantamount to the success of a child. You also spoke about your schooling in terms of where your school was basically a no-nonsense school, where your teachers expected nothing but the best from you. And it therefore doesn't surprise one to see the individual that we have in front of us today. What was interesting, though, is that you did an interview a couple of years ago, and you indicated that one of the lessons that you learned from that experience is that in doing and fighting for others, you end up helping yourself. How did that come about? Because you would have been the first recipient of the Mr. Dagger's scholarship in law.
Yeah.
And just a spill off from that is that while this should have been something that the entire nation should look at as a point to truly raise on the pillar and be proud of, you know, there are some in society, some sectors of society that used that as a point of contention. You know, you also said that that moment you cried and you were filled with joy, and you made the statement that that feeling you thought it was only in shows, in movies.
Yeah.
You know, so tell me about that.
Yeah. The UE's Makanda Daga Scholarship, I remember at the time I was working at UDCOT, and I got a call from an attorney at law, Jonathan Bagan, and he called me and he said, hey, he didn't know me from anyway. He messaged me on Facebook, got my number, called, and he said, I saw a scholarship advertising, and it's called the UE's Makanda Laga Scholarship in Law, and it's really aimed at trying to get activists to come into the profession of law. And yeah, I said, you know, I said, all right, cool. And he said, you know, I think that, you know, you are someone who definitely, you know, should apply and so on. And so the basis of the scholarship, that was, it is a UE scholarship. You know, a lot of persons have contention that it may have been a political scholarship in terms of NJAC and so on. I have no problem if it was, but it was not. It was a scholarship that was named after the late Makanda Daga, and a brainchild of Professor Rosemary Bellantwine, right, who is someone who I hold very close and dear to my heart. But Professor Antwine at the time, I did not know him, never met, never saw Professor Antwine prior to the interview. And the idea behind it was that you have so many attorneys who are coming out and they're doing it for the money. Yeah. They're doing it for, sometimes they ain't even doing it because they like it, they're probably doing it because apparently probably pushing them in that way or one way or the other. And then, of course, you would have attorneys who have, you know, want to fight against injustice and have different passions and so on. But Professor Antwine taught at that time that in order to find attorneys or to build attorneys whose passion is for service to people and in service to others, that this scholarship would be brought in order to, one, to give an opportunity to persons throughout any CARICOM national could have applied, right? And CARICOM nationals from all
the islands,
over,
yes.
The jurisdiction would have applied.
Right.
But it's to give the opportunity for persons who, one, meet the UE's matriculation requirements.
Right.
For law, it could have been, you must have a minimum of 5 CSEC passes, must have a minimum of 6 Communication Studies Caribbean and two other 2-unit courses, or associate degree on that level, or bachelor's degree and so on, right? So the basic matriculation, which I, at that time, had 8 CSEC passes, I had the 6K passes, but I didn't have the ones.
Right.
So I had a lot of 2s in Cape, 2's in Cape, 3's in Cape. And generally speaking, that would not have, in any general competitive scheme, would not have allowed me to matriculate just as only on the basis of that, because you have competing, because of course, you having to be, well, it's gate approved. Free, citizens much rather come to UWI St. Augustine and get that free as opposed to going to the University of London or different scenarios. So that was one, but also you had to be involved in some community or social activism, right? And once you fit that criteria and you can demonstrate how a law degree can go towards making you achieve betterment for your cause or for your community or for whatever you decide to represent, that was the idea behind it. And I applied for it. I applied probably the very last day because I didn't think I was going to get it. And then when I applied for it, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, there's the country of links, all right? So I was thinking, I don't think I'll get you, so many people from all over the Caribbean. You think this is why you might hear from Beetham going and get you. And so I applied. When I got the email that I was shortlisted and to come for the interview, I received the email because I didn't used to check my email. Now I check my email more than now I check my email more than WhatsApp. In fact, if you really want to get me, send me an email. I don't mess with emails, but when I check the email, I see, you have been shortlisted and you have this interview. I said, when is this? Well, I looked so they said, well, they sent it about 3 weeks before. But you only know. But I only now checked it. And the interview was less than an hour. I remember borrowing my co-worker car and I saying, what? Going home because I was in normal shirt. I wanted to, tell the thing.
Dash up, look fresh.
Dash up the road. Gone, and I did the interview, and the interview, it was thrilling. You had senior attorneys who asking the pertinent questions, and showing that hey, there's no easy work in the park here, and there were so many persons who were shortlisted as well. So I was like, Lord Father, and eventually I saw August come. The whole August passing, day in message. I say, all right. I say, if it's one thing in life, you must always know your place. Right? Yeah, right? You should not have applied for that. And that day, it was Independence Day in 2017, and I saw an email coming from my phone. I got the notification, left it down, went and prayed. I didn't even realize I was from UWI or anything. Prayed. Tell Jehovah God at that time, I was telling Jehovah God on that specific day that, I want my life to be, I want it to be filled with His purpose. And because I was going to work as going at 8 to 4, it wasn't fulfilling. I didn't enjoy it. And I know that I wanted to do more. And after I done pray, open the thing and they say, see attached letter. And I see about 20 people copied. I said, all right, they probably be rejection letter they given to everybody. And when I opened it and I learned that I was awarded the McCandless Scholarship, and it was actually the first time in my whole life that I cried for joy, And it's true, I really thought it was a myth. Like you telling any child in the hood about crying, you just cry because you happy. What wrong with you, dog? What is your scene, But at that time, I couldn't help it because there you are praying to Jehovah God for, purpose, and you're seeing His vision and His purpose being fulfilled. And what it tells me, especially with education, as we bring this to the issue of education and how persons learn, how people... I went into UWI and I graduated with upper second class honors. First began the dropouts in terms of there were a lot of students, one, who started and didn't finish, and would have got requests to withdraw because of bad grades. Persons who have spent 6-7 years on a degree, because they have failed so many courses back and forth and so on. I was probably about 0.2 or 1 or something away from first class honors. And here it was that I entered a program with ideally with persons who have all the ones, who have all the degrees, who have all, and were still able to graduate at the upper level of a bunch of students. And I'm not saying it because it's nothing to compare and contrast, but I'm saying that clearly Professor Belantwine and University of the West Indies knew what they were doing, because the grades can not only be the metric that we use to determine a person's success, a person's ability, and all these things here. But unlike, different persons who may have been given preferential treatment at different institutions in terms of when they were actually there, I had no preferential treatment other than getting the scholarship. And when I reached there, I worked very hard. I went to class. I sat my exams. I do a lot of all-nighters, spend all kind of time in UWE, getting myself ready. And by the grace of Jehovah God, with the support of peers, a lot of my friends, we stuck together with support of lecturers. At the time, even, I remember he's now an attorney, Vaughan Thomas, who at the time was a final year student. Ayana, different persons from different grades who from higher years that were able to help along the way, and say, hey, I think there's a point here you should look at when you're trying to understand this topic and so on. So all of that to say that this whole experience I got an opportunity and I took full advantage of it. And of course I went on to Hewden Law School, completed my LEC, and after, while I was at Hewden, you have to do a 10-week training with an attorney. Right. I remember, listen, from primary school, I have been watching my senior on news, on papers, and I used to say, I want to work for her. Yeah. Like I think that attorney is like the best attorney. And I never knew her, never met her, and that is Mrs. Pamela, the senior counsel. And I remember even on Facebook, sometime years before, I never even saw her, never met her. And, I had as my status that Mrs. Pamela, the senior counsel, exemplifies Black legal excellence. And by it I was commenting and saying, oh, what a day. I didn't even start law school at that time. Eh? I used to be real violent on Facebook and telling people things that nobody asked me. Yeah. Like, really, the old Kareem was real. He needs some work. But at that time, when I was in first year at Hewden, I asked Hewden at the time, anyone, because sometimes they would place you if you don't have persons.
All right.
And I kept asking, could I get to work in the chambers of Mrs. Elder? And they was like, no, Mrs. Elder don't no longer taking students. She has sort of retired from that mentorship aspect. And and it so happened that I knew another senior attorney, and he offered me to come and work with him. And I mean, he's a senior counsel now. He's my brother. But at the time when he was offering me to work, I said, sorry to say this, but by chance, you think you can speak to Mrs. Ella, find out if if the chamber is willing to take and so on. And he was like, I did ask a few years ago, and senior has not has indicated that she's not taking any more students again and so on. But it was during the height of COVID, and he said, "But do you still want me to ask?" I said, "Yes." Mm. He said, "All right." I said, "The worst can happen is," she said, "No." Yeah. And we move on. And when he asked, he called me and he said, "Well, I got news for you." I said, "Get through here now. Take it down. He said, "No, senior." I said, "You can drop off a resume." So he mean I said drop. That is like the uncle asking for a resume. The meme what they say. When the uncle asks for a resume, 10 years later, you're still waiting. When I hear ask for the resume, I said, all right, that morning I get up on a full 3-piece suit, like if I go in for an interview, just going to drop the resume, drop the resume. And it so happened, I asked senior assistant, if she's in, and she said, yeah, but she can't see you now. I said, all right. I pretend as if I'm waiting for somebody to pick me up, right? And I did sitting down, waiting to see, well, all right, probably you should already know, but in the next half an hour, you never know. And it so happened that in the next half hour or so, somebody said, yeah, look, senior finished and she's ready. And we did an interview, senior cross-examined me like, that was an interview with a cross-examination. But I started to work there and, senior said that because of the COVID and because she has some time in terms of a lot of trials were being vacated and so on, and that she would have the time in order to, to do proper mentorship and so on. But she would see, and eventually she called and I got it, and that was history. I worked there for the first 10 weeks. I went above and beyond, and before I left, senior offered me to come back in her chambers to work full time when I'm finished with law, as well as brought me on to start teaching with her. So I'm also a teacher. I teach Cape Law, Form 6 at elders classes, and we just started to that mentorship. I mean, I thank God so much for my mentor and my colleagues. I'm in a chambers with so many brilliant attorneys who really have my best interests at heart, and I'm able to tap into their intelligence, their resources, their strategies, and so my law practice is definitely top tier, by God's grace, top tier with mentorship, everything.
So the dog from Beetham reached whole of justice.
Mm-hmm.
And, what is also inspiring about this story is that you had a dream.
Mm-hmm.
You had a dream since that you were young, right? You play yourself on Facebook, as you said, right? But you worked hard at it.
Very.
You had your mom who was pushing you and insisting nothing but the best from you.
Mm-hmm.
You had your school that, ensured that you did nothing but the best. Mm-hmm. And we have reached university now where we are seeing the importance of having mentorship and role models. Now, there's something that is important, which brings us right back to the topic, where you said that in your process of the interview and in the design of this scholarship, the university recognized that one's academic achievements ought not to be the only factor that we use to either gauge a student or assess whether or not somebody is, I guess, successful, right? However, unfortunately, our education system and the education system of the world bends and leans towards academic performance. What is your view on that, and how can we change that?
I think that there must be a blend, a mix, taking into consideration different criteria. And the thing is, even our education system in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, is just tailored towards, you passing a specific exam, one exam. You may be good, you may require more time. I will tell you, I just write very slow. I can type fast, but I just write very slow. And most of my problems in terms of exams is that I don't have enough time, right? Anytime I have more time, But all of that to say is, who are we as human beings? Is it that we are defined only by our academic success, our accolades? Or is it that we aim to develop well-rounded citizens of this country? Well-rounded in the sense of, you may look at someone who is a B student, but that B student is playing Panorama for Renegades. All right? He's also on the national football team. Also on weekends, volunteer with his local non-profit organization and so on. And maintains, let's say, a B+, A- average. And you may look at someone who, another student, who is not involved in sports, not involved in any giving back, but from school, lessons, homework, and repeat and that. And that person is fine. That is perfectly fine if that is how that student wants to live their life, and their parents encouraging them in that way, or whether they do it on their own. And you find that student is an A+ student, right, and maintains that. Society ought not to try to value one or place one higher than the other.
Correct.
In fact, they are different routes, and there are different goals, there are different aims and objectives, and therefore that method in terms of only paying attention to the academics, of course, it's an unfair position if you really want to try to develop well-rounded students, well-rounded citizens who understand their social responsibility to this country. Because that student A that I now spoke about, who might be a B plus or A minus average student, who is doing all these different things, contributing to our culture, contributing to our sports, contributing to our national development, our community service, our economy, all of that, may very well be the type of citizen that we want. We're not talking about 50 years ago, where it was just a privilege to get to CSEC.
Correct. Yes.
Or to have a degree, that. So now we have a country that has been developed in such a way that we have free education from preschool, primary school, secondary school, and tertiary education. Like, I don't even think that people in citizens of Trinidad and Tobago truly understand and respect and cherish that.
Correct.
The fact that when you go to other Caribbean nations, persons have to pay to go primary school, pay to go secondary school, pay to sit.
You wouldn't believe that about a year or two ago, this is one of our island brothers and sisters was going in a general election, and the political party in their manifesto indicated that they promise to make CSEC math and English free.
And it's like, what? With our privilege self?
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
And then I can recall in one of our more northern island brothers' country, the government announced two policies which was hailed as, I guess, a big social intervention. One of them was the latrine eradication program in the school, and the other one is to indicate that the government is now pursuing the program to introduce, this would have been probably like 2018, to introduce the breakfast program 3 days a week, right? And I was like, what? This is so 1962 for us in Trinidad and Tobago. But I guess it begs the question, and it gives us an appreciation of, is it that we are living in a silo, that we do not know what is out there? Because I always find it interesting that when videos come out where other islanders come to Trinidad and Tobago and they hear what we have, they make videos and, well, in Trinidad they have this, they have that. And, we are citizens. Like, what was it?
Yeah. You see, it is our normal. And therefore, when we were born, as children, it is something that we are accustomed to, so we take it for granted. And that's why it's important for even conversations like these to inform the population and compare to what we did not have, to what we have now, and what we have now to what others that we look up to and say we want to be like this one and that one. And we realize how much better we have it here. It's not to take for granted the challenges that we face, but it's important for us to, when looking at it, to understand historically that years ago, even in the Honorable Prime Minister's, when he spoke about his upbringing and in his book and so on, being one of the very first in his family to attend secondary school, yes. You had to win a scholarship in order to go to secondary school. And then, of course, a scholarship to go to university and so on. So education then, even in this country, would have been, and those who were able to access it, but for the ones who were able to win scholarships, education was limited or designed really for the persons with money to succeed. So when you found that, that only certain persons were working in certain sectors and were holding top position for years, and be able to take into consideration that is Dr. Eric Williams' vision followed by Mr. Manning more specifically, as it relates to equalizing the playing field in this country relative to education, so that the young East Indian girl from Penal who might be very poor, and the young African man from Carenage who might be poor, can have the same opportunity as a young lady as a young student in Mocha or Federation Park or elsewhere, in the sense that you can go to the best of the best primary schools, you can go to the best of the best secondary school, you can go after that and do your degree. And I mean, now we have sort of, based on our financial situation, have sort to limit some aspects and, and bring some level of control, and so that we have, equity in relation to the distribution of our tertiary education and how we spend our fees. But there were persons who were doing
3 and 4
degrees,
yes.
doing masters, doing what you want because the government was paying for it.
Yes.
And I mean, that was an investment that our leaders would have made into our young people, and therefore creating one of the most educated populations in this hemisphere. And therefore we have to take into consideration all of that to know that if someone goes to school and they don't like book work, they don't like the going and do chemistry or doing biology or French or Spanish, whatever the case may be, but they are good with their hands. I have the greatest amount of respect for our tradesmen and the persons in different fields. The same that I would afford my peers in the engineering, the medical, the law, etc. Because everyone has their part to play. And my road, my journey and my road is different from what you may have, and therefore, but at the same time, we are all contributing to a better society. And that is important, that we, from very young, we explain to young persons that it's okay to like business. It's okay, and it should be encouraged in terms of business. It should be encouraged in terms of if you want to do vocational studies, if you want to be the best plumber, if you want to be whether it's a tiresman, a carpenter, whatever the case may be, because that too is a career, and that too is education, and that too you may be the best carpenter, but you may not be able to draw up a plan or to tell us about the Constitution. How do we value that?
Correct.
If you give the best carpenter in the world to sit an exam, a medical exam, you would find that that the medical students will do. But you put you and I, and you give us a test to go and to cut some wood and then pop some profile and build some blocks and tile it after. We don't know where to start.
Correct. Correct.
And therefore we need to rethink and reimagine how, as a society, how we place persons or even try to do it, but that we encourage our children that once they have a passion, once they have a goal, that they work hard for it. I understand, of course, the basics of learning how to read, how to write, and to have that basic academic foundation.
Correct.
But it's also important for you to, beyond that, to build on whatever is your dreams.
Correct. Now, it's interesting as well. In your in your contribution, right? In true, you have been speaking about the evolution of education and the education system in Trinidad and Tobago. And now the Ministry of Education is speaking about a review, and I guess the next phase of education for us, and they are focusing on digital literacy and a review of the curriculum. Now, you are right that in the past we have placed an emphasis on academics, and probably now is the time where we must have our own Juilliard school for culture, where, as you indicated, that the basics, learning how to read, write, math, English, is done. But this is where, as student, I remember in our youth club, we had she is still a talented young lady. Yes, she did well. She went on to Bishops. But there was no true space for her at a young age to harness those skills that in reality, she, her family, her community, and the society of Trinidad and Tobago is better served with her utilizing her skill. So as we are wrapping up now, Kareem, what I want to find out from you, if you can change one thing in our education system for your community of Beetham Gardens and environs, that would position your community, our community, in a better place, what would that one thing be?
I would think that from a very young age, perhaps in primary school, if we can implement, I don't want to say it's as simple as having career fairs or whatever the case may be, but an evaluation and guidance as to what our young person's passion. And once you know their passion from very young, to push them in that direction in order to achieve those potential, whilst of course still being able to accomplish the basic, the math, the English, and so on. In the sense that Juliet's point that you raised was so brilliant, because there are young persons who are in class who cannot pay attention and they are not focused simply because it is not the right space for them.
Right.
So I think that it is something that we have that we must work on in terms of the assessment of our young persons from a very young age, knowing what are their potentials, what are their interests, what are their passion, and having a system that is designed to make them achieve those truest potential. For some, it may mean the regular road in terms of CSEC, then to the degree, then to law school, then to medical school, or whatever the case may be, in order to achieve that goal, and that is perfectly fine. But you put them in a room with children of like-mindedness, and what you would find is that they would even achieve their goals much faster and much better.
Correct.
But you put our cultural, our students who is focused heavily on singing or culture or whatever the case may be, you put them in Trinidad and Tobago's version of Juilliard.
Yeah.
And they would be able they would be happier, they would be able to prove, to achieve their truest potential and to serve this country and this world better. Can you imagine if, whether it is Marcelle, whether it is Bungie, they're in school and and their parents telling them, no, you can't go and sing. I don't want you focus on no soca and no calypso. You focus on your work. You have SE coming up, but we must have that kind of vision and that kind of work. So I think that is definitely one of the things that I want to see in our communities. And we can start that. We don't need to transform a whole education system to do that. But we can bring different persons from different aspects and different fields within this country and bring them into our communities. And that's one of the main things that I intend to do, to create proper career guidance and mentorship and career, whether it's fairs, whether it's lectures and so on, and going into these different schools within my constituency of Laventille West and beyond, because I think that is important, because I didn't know how to start law. I didn't know from very young, what are the subjects I might need to focus on more.
Correct.
In terms of primary school. I might have been able to, to focus a little more when I reach in Form 1, in terms of these are the subjects I need to, focus on. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to, to achieve. And once we are able to get that, whether it's sporting, all these different things will propel this nation and make sure that our children and our citizens become the best versions of themselves.
All right. So, Kareem, in our wrapping up, let's, for our audience, to get to know Kareem a little more. So we're just going to do what we'll call rapid blue questions.
Yeah.
And you'll let me know. So, Christmas or Carnival?
Carnival.
Same. So, what is your guilty pleasure snack?
Guilty pleasure snack. thing is, I really like snack. Cheese stick, popcorn.
Bigfoot must be in there, man. Spicy Bigfoot.
It's there, but it's in. Actually, my favorite, I consider it food, but it's not really food. It could be a snack too. It's cake. You see cake? Listen, like when I was younger, there was a lady in the community. Whenever she make cake, she bring for me, and she used to call me a cake.
What is one book that you would have read that changed your life?
Ivan Van Stima, They Came Before Columbus.
Okay, I'll read that one. If Lavantil is to be a superhero, what superhero power you think Lavantil would have?
Resilience. We are the most resilient people in this world. You give us anything, and we'll make it better. You know, whether it's a sculpture, you give us a drum, and Winston Spree Simon give us our national instrument today. You know, anything that you give us, anything, right? And once we get our young people to truly understand that, I think that is one of the main steps to change the mindset and to let us know that we could achieve whatever we wish to do. No matter what are the circumstances thrown at us, the vast majority of us come out well-rounded, positive citizens of this country. So I say that to say that resilience is our superpower.
So there you would have had it, listeners of The Blueprints with Dr. Jelani Reid. And we had the pleasure of having our guest, Mr. Kareem Marcelle, and we would have explored the whole question of education. Through Kareem's story, we would have heard the importance of parents, of their role, the importance of teachers, and how impactful they are to ensure one's success. We would have also heard about the importance of mentors and having a mentorship, and most of all, faith in God and opportunity. So as we continue to explore on the blueprints many various concepts, education continues to be the foundation to which we all can use to change our circumstance. And changing one's circumstance doesn't mean necessarily from poverty out of it to wealth, but it's to change one circumstance that regardless of wherever you are, you very well could be a doctor, now a podcast host.
Yeah.
Right? Or you can be an attorney at law who is now pursuing true community service in that of public life. You know, education is that foundation to push us forward. So, viewers, we would love to continue to hear from you. You know, tune in on our social media handles, The Blueprint Podcast, as well as if it is that you have any ideas or even you want to nominate a guest to be here with us, you know, you can email us at theblueprintpodcast2025@gmail.com. So, thank you for viewing. Stay connected with us, and until we see each other on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Nice one.